Hello and welcome to this Astranti financial training video. Today we are starting a series of videos that are going to walk you through the ACCA SBL pre-scene for the December 2024 exam. So what we intend to do in these three videos is take you through the pre-scene line by line and draw out the really interesting points, draw out the points we really think you need to bear in mind, draw out the points that are going to relate back to the ACCA syllabus, and hopefully give you a lot of food for thought as you plan your exams, as you revise, and of course, as you sit your actual exams. Then in the following two videos, we are going to be examining the top 10 issues and the strategic analysis video. So in the top 10 issues, what we do is using our experience as case study providers is come up with the 10 most likely issues that we think you are willing to come across in your exam. And we base that really on our experience and also on the issues that have been raised in this pre-scene. In the strategic analysis video, we take everything we've learned in the pre-scene and we feed it through models and theories like Porter's 5 forces and SWOT analysis and balanced scorecard, and we look at ethics and all these different things. So really this as a video series really fits together. But as I mentioned, in the first three videos, what we're doing is walking you and talking you through the pre-scene. So why don't we get cracking and start examining the pre-scene? So obviously, we've got our content on our very first page and it starts to introduce the topics we're going to be covering. Now, I should point out in this first video, we're going to get down to about page 4. So what we're going to be covering in this very first video is an introduction to the company and the country and the industry. Then we're moving on to the overview, which is the events management industry as a whole overview and looking at events management in Harland. Then in the second video, we'll carry on by looking at the events management industry as a whole, by looking at the technical innovations, etc., and the events management industry KPIs. And then we'll start to focus more in on Rodnim, which is, of course, the company that we are looking at, or you're looking at in this pre-scene. And we'll cover the first few sections of the Rodnim in the second video, before in our third video, our final video where we're just focusing solely on the pre-scene, then we'll look at the information systems, then we'll focus in on Rodnim's extracts from their website, their risk register, as well as their financial performance. So that's the kind of rough breakdown of these three videos. So let's get cracking now and actually get to the nitty-gritty and start to work our way through this pre-scene as a whole. So of course, the very first section is on Rodnim itself. So here we can see the company is called Rodnim Events, and the country which we've already mentioned that Rodnim operates in is within Harland. Rodnim was established 6 years ago and manages events for both corporate and private clients. And the two founders of Rodnim set up a partnership rather than a limited company, so they've got total control over their business. So a really kind of short section for us to get our teeth into. Now, we don't find out much about Harland in this opening introduction, but we later find out that Harland is described as a prosperous country with a highly competitive events management industry. So what we're going to see is that Rodnim has got opportunities for growth, but yet there's also going to be challenge related to intense competition. So it's really important that throughout this video that we understand the local market conditions like economic stability, cultural preferences, and the existing competition if we're to work out how Rodnim is going to establish a competitive advantage. So we've got to really understand the different types of events, we've got to find gaps in the market, and we've also got to think how we can tailor, and I'm going to use Rodnim and we interchangeably throughout this video, how we can tailor our services to meet the needs of the corporate and private clients that we can see in this introduction that we focus upon. Now we can see when we look at Rodnim a bit more in this introductory section that Rodnim is an emerging business. It's only 6 years old, so this status gives it some established relationships and credibility, but also there's still going to be growth opportunities. And as an emerging business, Rodnim is most likely in the growth phase of the business life cycle, so it's survived the initial startup risks, but obviously it's still going to be working to expand its market share and improving its profitability. And there's possibly also the suggestion that because of the relatively young age of the company, there could be a need for continuous investment in terms of brand recognition and customer relationships and operational capabilities in order to compete with the larger, more established players in Harland, of which we'll find out more later on. So I think what we're going to be thinking about here, some ideas that come to mind is, well, how is Rodnim going to identify strategies for growth? And of course, that's something that we'll consider in Ansoff's matrix as well as in other tools in our strategic analysis video later on in this series. Now, we can also find details of Rodnim's partnership structure. So what we can see with the partnership structure is that the founders have total control, which is why they've opted for this as structure. But it also implies there's unlimited personal liability, and of course that affects governance and risk exposure. Now, a benefit of a partnership structure is that it allows for direct decision making without the need for shareholder approval, and of course that can lead to faster strategic responses. But of course, as we've already touched upon, the downside is that the partners are personally liable for business debts, and of course that can impact their risk tolerance and strategic decisions. Now, this structure also affects the ability to raise finance, as partnerships often face challenges in accessing external funding compared to limited companies, which can issue shares. Okay, there's the kind of initial issues that we can see coming out of the introduction. Let's just scroll down a bit now so we've got more of the next section on screen, which is, of course, Harland's Events Management Industry, or Harland Events Management Industry, I should say, to be grammatically correct. Okay, and so what we find out from this opening paragraph of this section 2 is basically what an event is. And obviously at an event, individuals or groups of people mix with one another. Normally they are for a planned and stated specific purpose. There's different sizes of events. So you've got large events, which are corporate conferences, music concerts, festivals and sports events, but then you get these smaller types of events which are, weddings and parties for particular individuals. So what we're seeing here is the concept of events management is about planning, is about organizing, is about coordinating events, and this depends, or these skills runs to various sizes. So if we're thinking about the UK, for example, we might think of a big festival event like Glastonbury. It's going to have, still involves planning, organizing and coordinating, but a much bigger scale than someone's wedding. but at the very root of these events is the same set of skills. So the core responsibilities of events management business includes making sure that all aspects of an event just run smoothly, and that obviously the event achieves the client's objectives. So obviously this requires a combination of logistical expertise, stakeholder coordination, and risk management to guarantee successful event delivery. Okay, so in the second paragraph, it's kind of reinforcing what we've told about the role of events management businesses, about what they do, and that they are making sure, or they're in charge of making sure that the events, whatever they are, from the biggest to the smallest, run smoothly. And we find out here a bit about how they charge. So we can see that the events management business charge a fee to clients for managing events, also about the squiggly line, but any revenue generated from the event itself is kept by the client. So what we're seeing here is a fixed income model for Rodnim, where the revenue is determined by service fees rather than performance-based income from events. Now, this limits financial risk in terms of direct exposure to event success, but can also cap potential earnings. So what we've got to understand also is how this revenue model impacts risk exposure as well as strategic financial decisions. And I think that the fixed fee structure also means that effective cost management is really important for Rodnim to maintain profitability, and also ties into kind of risk management and client relationships and service quality. But we'll come on to that more for Rodnim when we get to the finances section. But obviously, this isn't specifically talking about Rodnim, but events management businesses in Harland as a whole. Okay, and then we find out in this third paragraph about how events management businesses actually are asked or get the contracts with clients. So what they have to do is that they are invited to tender to manage the events, and each tender submission kind of details how the event is going to be managed, what services are provided, and obviously the fee that is going to be charged by the company like Rodnim. Now, the client is then going to review the tenders and then awards the contract based on the tender or based on the business which has presented the most suitable proposal. And what we're seeing here is that basically we've got a really kind of competitive way in which to gain clients, and that success is really going to depend on demonstrating both value for money and having a clear understanding of what the client needs. And to have an effective tendering proposal, you're going to need detailed planning, detailed cost estimation, and a real strong value proposition in order to differentiate yourself or the events management from their competitors. So again, what we might be thinking of later in the strategic analysis video, is kind of Porter's generic strategies. We can think about that in terms of how Rodnim could differentiate themselves from their competitors when it comes to the tender proposal, where they want to be cost leaders or where they want to differentiate. And we also really want to have an understanding about procurement and supply chain management. Okay, so let's scroll down now to the next element of the overview. In fact, let's go all the way down so we can get a bit more in. And what we find out about in this paragraph is basically the market size and revenue growth. So we can see it's the revenue generated from events globally. It was estimated at $1,960 billion with an estimated 11% annual growth for each of the next 5 years. And we can also see that events management businesses charge between 35 and 40% of events ticket sales in their fees for managing the events. So it's financially lucrative and a very competitive industry. Corporate clients, however, and smaller private events normally charge a fixed fee negotiated in advance. Obviously, that would be a fixed fee rather than a ticket price, which you'd hope no one's going to charge to go to a wedding. So as it kind of clearly states, in the text, is that there's a real significant growth potential in the events management industry. So actually, it's a really attractive sector for businesses like Rodnim. We saw they charge kind of a sizable chunk of the event ticket sales. So it's financially lucrative, but obviously it's also a competitive industry. So we also saw in this paragraph that there's a mix of fee structures which allows for both stability in the terms of the fixed fee. So for the corporate clients, the smaller private events, you've got your fixed fee there, but also there's opportunities for higher earnings when you get your percentage-based fees for managing events that have the ticket sales that we can take, or they can take 35 to 40% from. So I think what we need to work out here is, we know what we need to work out. So what we need to bear in mind is how the size and the projected growth of the market are going to influence Rodnim's strategic planning as well as its investment decisions, and also understand the revenue model. We see this both fixed fees and percentage-based fees revenue model. We've got to understand how that fits into pricing strategy and managing financial risk. And also, this is going to tie into helping us understand the competitive environment. But again, that's when we come to Rodnim more specifically, probably in a later video from this, because what we're going to do now is move on to looking at events management in Harland. We're going to find out more about Harland itself and the competitive landscape. Okay, as we touched upon in the introduction, Harland is a large, prosperous and economically advanced country that has an established and highly competitive events management industry. And the industry comprises a variety of businesses, some which operate only locally, but others that operate nationally, as well as some that have international reach. So obviously understanding the competitive landscape that Rodnim is going to be operating in is really important for identifying opportunities in order to differentiate and position Rodnim effectively in the market, because it's facing a diverse range of events management businesses. So obviously Rodnim's got to work out how it's going to fit into this environment. Now, of course, again, don't want to keep saying this, but we're going to be moving on to Rodnim later on. So at the moment, we're just setting the scene of which Rodnim is operating within. Okay, so the Harland events management market is dominated by 4 major competitors who have around 74% of the total events management share, and that's measured by fee income. Now, the remainder is shared between many small events management businesses, so that's the remaining 26% of the market share. And we can see here that in 20x13, the revenue generated by events in Harland was $108 billion, with events management businesses like Rodnim earning around $39 billion worth of fees for managing these events. So what we're seeing here is the dominance of large players. But the opportunities available for smaller companies like Rodnim to carve out a niche in a highly competitive environment. Now, competing against established companies requires a focus on differentiation, customer service, and niche market strategies. So one of the things that we're going to be looking at again in the strategic analysis video is looking at Porter's 5 forces and see how we can use that to determine the intensity of competition within Harland, and of course then identify any potential areas for competitive advantage. We've also got to think really about the dominance of large companies in the market relating to barriers to entry, and think about how Rodnim may overcome those barriers, perhaps through strategic differentiation or perhaps through targeted service offerings. Okay, let's move down now to the next section, which is types of events. And I'm going to leave as much clear space as I can up. I can't. I'm going to have them all up there then. Okay, so there are kind of 6 major categories to which events managed by businesses in Harland fall into. We've got music concerts, conferences, festivals, sports events, private events, and virtual events. Now, I'm sure none of these really needs any explanation. So obviously music concerts are live music performances that take place in front of audiences, and of course the size of an audience and type of music performed vary from concert to concert. Just think if you go out for a night, say in a city in the UK, we're going to very small venues like the Shepherd's Bush Hall, which would be kind of niche music, maybe, I don't know, 300 people in the audience. And then, of course, you have these massive venues like the O2 Arenas or the Wembley Arenas and things like that. So it just varies from venue to venue. Then we've got our conferences. So this is when people come together to discuss specific topics or assess topics. And again, these can vary in size. And in Harland, they're usually held in major towns and cities. And what we see again in the UK is the very biggest conferences are kind of held in kind of specific conference venues, or kind of like in hotels, really large venues in which multiple people can be housed. But of course, that can become much smaller depending on the needs of the conference. Then we've got things like festivals, which are basically cultural or social events, and they again can vary from size and duration. So the biggest festival we have in the UK, as an example, would be Glastonbury. But of course, you can also have very small kind of town or village events which be classed as festivals also. Then we can move down to sports events, so I don't know, games, matches, races, so things like Formula One or football, any type of sport basically. And what we notice here, this is one of the growth areas in events in Harland over the last 5 years. Then we come on to private events. So this is things for families and friends, weddings, birthdays. But here there's not been any significant growth in the number of private events over the last 5 years. So that's opposed to the sports events. And then finally, we've got virtual events, which is probably the only one that may need a little bit of elaboration. So these are online events. So it means you don't have to go to a specific venue. We talked about, the O2 Arenas or Bush Hall earlier on, or Glastonbury Festival. Here, as long as you've got an internet connection, then you can go to it via your computer or your phone. And these could be any type of event that we've just talked about. And these are growing in popularity because they have wide geographical reach and don't incur any travel costs for the participants. Now, an example of this, during the pandemic, the Royal Albert Hall, which is this huge concert venue in the UK that puts on a variety of different musical events, they started having virtual events. And because the musicians couldn't even get to the Royal Albert Hall, they were doing it from their bedrooms. So I saw lots of musicians playing from their houses. But of course, now that kind of has carried on. And you can see things like the Royal Opera over the internet connection, or a kind of events that you can include yourself in. So what I mean by that is maybe wine tasting events or cider events, things you can drink at home and you're listening to the person talk and you're actually getting involved in. So there's lots of different ways that virtual events can actually happen. And so it's sports and virtual events that are the growth areas in Harland, while private events, there's been no significant growth at all over the last 5 years. So each of these events that we've had listed here, these 6 different events, they represent distinct market segments and opportunities for specialization. Now, the growth in sports, in virtual events, points to emerging trends which an organization like Rodnim could leverage in order to gain a competitive advantage. And it also ties into strategic planning and market development, because it's where Rodnim will be considering expanding its portfolio in order to try to capitalize on these growing segments. Okay, so there we go. There's our types of events and our different market segments. Let's scroll down now to the breakdown of the fee income generated by each type of event in the Harland events management industry. So we've got our 6 events on screen again. So we can see that music, concerts and conferences generate the highest fee income at 27% and 26%. Virtual events are the least at 5%, but of course, as we saw, they are growing in popularity. And this low percentage of virtual events really suggests that this is an emerging opportunity for a company like Rodnim. But also what they could do is consider increasing its focus on conferences and festivals, because they are the most lucrative, but also in terms of virtual opportunities, it's perhaps future growth opportunity. So we should also bear in mind that sports is the biggest growing event here as well. So let's move down now to our next section, which is the types of clients. So the first group of clients that we're looking at here are the corporate clients, and we can see that the market is dominated by corporate clients. So these clients are organizations that require the management of these kind of large scale events like music concerts, conferences, festivals, sports, etc. Now, this has been the case for many years and isn't expected to change. So what we're seeing is that corporate clients contribute significantly to the industry's fee income, given their demand for large and complex event management services. Now, on the other hand, we've got private clients. Now, private clients are just individuals who employ events management businesses to manage these kind of smaller personal events. Now, for an organization like Rodnim, and okay, we don't know about Rodnim yet. Now, obviously, what we're seeing here is, I suppose, an opportunity for diversification, because private clients represent a smaller share of the overall market compared to corporate clients. But again, I guess what we're seeing is a differentiation here between these kind of fixed fee private clients and the opportunity to earn kind of a percentage of the ticket with our corporate clients. So a thing to bear in mind here is to understand the distinction between corporate and private clients, so that Rodnim is able to tailor its services to meet the specific needs of each of these different segments. So for the corporate clients, it may be about maintaining strong relationships and understanding their organizational needs in order to kind of get this recurring business and these larger contracts. But for private clients, it might be more of a focus on personalization or customer experience to kind of win that contract, which might not be as recurring because, how many times you're going to get married? Well, hopefully just the once. So really this does tie into strategic marketing because Rodnim's going to have to consider how to effectively position its services to attract and retain different types of clients. But of course, there are more than 2 types of clients in Harland. So let's just get down now to see the third group, which is public sector clients. Public sector clients have events including, government conferences, maybe discussing particular policy issues or kind of major sports events or national festivals. And we can see that the Harland national government has recently engaged several events management businesses to run a series of virtual conferences. But again, similar to what we saw with the private clients and the public clients, really it's important to understand the different types of clients and their needs in order to secure business and also maintain a strong reputation across all fields. Now, one thing to note here is that they have recently engaged businesses to run a series of virtual conferences, which also suggests that virtual conferences is a really kind of important aspect. And this is being highlighted to us in the pre-scene. And it also shows that the public sector clients are willing to leverage new technologies in order to engage a wider audience. So I think what we can see in the next section, or that this ties into the next section, is that all 3 types of clients expect creative and innovative ideas to ensure events are well managed and meet the specific requirements of the client, whoever they are. And they are also expected to be, events management business, offer a professional level of service throughout. So Rodnim is going to have to continuously innovate to meet growing client expectations for creative solutions. Okay, let's scroll down now to the last section of this part of the pre-scene, but also this video. And here we're looking at the breakdown of the fee income generated by each type of client in the Harland events management industry. And we can see here that corporate clients at 73% are the dominant source of fee income for events management businesses in Harland. That's followed by the public sector. And then finally, we have the private individuals contributing 4%. So what we're seeing here is the possibility, I don't want to reiterate, we don't know much about Rodnim yet, but they really should continue to prioritize kind of corporate clients, as well as the growing opportunities in the public sector, because really this represents a significant portion of the market. But what have we seen so far? Well, we saw the public sector was kind of trying new areas like virtual conferences. Well, that could really help Rodnim increase or diversify their revenue streams. But it also demonstrates that there is a challenge stemming from the fact there's only a low percentage of fees coming from private individuals. So it might be very different to scale in this segment, which suggests that actually we should be focusing on moving on to corporate clients or public sector, or finding a niche within those areas, perhaps by offering premium or personalized services. Could be this niche strategy for growth in these areas. So basically what we've been looking at here really is the idea of analyzing fee income by client type can be used to inform strategic decisions about which segments to focus on for growth. So there we go, that is the first part of, well, that's our first video, actually looking at the first few pages of the ACCA SBL pre-scene, where we've introduced ourselves to the company, Rodnim. We've introduced ourselves into the idea of the events management business, and we've started to take a closer look at the events management business within Harland, and the opportunities, the types of events, and the types of clients. We're going to continue looking at Harland as a whole in the next video, but then we're going to start to focus in on Rodnim itself and start to bring in these kind of strands that we've started picking up from the pre-scene so far to kind of really inform us about what we think Rodnim can do, any possible issues that Rodnim may face in your exam. So there we go. Thank you very much for watching this first video in this series. Before we leave, I just wanted to point you in the direction of astranti.com, because if you are sitting your ACCA SBL exam, and let's face it, you wouldn't have got to the end of this video if you weren't, then you definitely should check out astranti.com to make sure you are as well prepared for your exams as you possibly can be. And if nothing else, just to get your free industry analysis, where you'll be learning all about the real world events management business. Then of course you can access the final two videos of the pre-scene analysis. You can also access the strategic analysis, where we'll be running through Ansef's matrix, Porter's 5 forces, Mendelow's matrix, balanced scorecards, SWOT analysis, amongst others, where we take everything we learn on the pre-scene and feed it through, so you've got all that info at your fingertips ready for your exam. You'll be also able to access your top 10 issues video. Now the top 10 issues video is where we work out, using our experience and all the little hints in the pre-scene, what we think are most likely, or the most likely issues that you're going to face in the exam. And then we tell you how best you should answer them and how best you should prepare for them. You can also access the 2 pre-scene based mock exams, the exam technique mini course, as well as the live and recorded master classes. So as you can see, we've got everything covered for you. Just head over to astranti.com. But otherwise, I will see you at the pre-scene video 2.